Welcome everyone to our orthopedic surgery grand rounds. Today we have a very special visiting guest, Dr. Okunlami from University of Michigan. Dr. Westrak will formally introduce him. First, we also have an announcement from Dr. Shearer.
Thanks, Drew, and sorry to take time. I wanted to formally welcome our two guests from Tanzania, Patrick Nganyale and George Ambila, if they could stand up very briefly and say hello. Hopefully everyone's had an opportunity to meet them. Many of our current, some of our current residents, many of our faculty have visited Muhimbili Orthopaedic Institute as part of our exchange program that we have for residents and faculty. George and Patrick are the first in our ongoing effort to have a true one-to-one exchange between our two institutions. So they are the first two of hopefully many more visitors coming from Muhimbili. So if you see them around, they'll be at Mount Zion, Parnassus, the General. Please introduce yourself to them, make them welcome, and they'll be here for another two. They've been here for 2 weeks, and they'll be here for another 2 weeks. So please make an opportunity to introduce yourselves to them. So thank you.
Thank you. One quick announcement before we get started. Please don't forget the holiday party next Friday, December 8th. Please RSVP. We'll be at the San Francisco Design Center. So we're looking forward to that. So welcome everyone to our grand rounds, and a special welcome to Dr. Franmi Okunlami, our visiting professor. He actually has the distinction of being invited independently and separately by two groups. Our PM&R division, as well as our DEI committee, independently came up with your name. And so we're so excited to have you here. So Dr. Okunlami is assistant professor of family medicine, PM&R, and urology at University of Michigan. He's also an adjunct assistant professor of orthopedic surgery at UCLA. So we need to take a page out of their book and get you on our staff as well. He is also the Director of Student Accessibility and Accommodation Services at the University of Michigan, where he oversees the Office of Students for Services for Students with Disabilities, 2 testing accommodation centers, and the Adaptive Sports and Fitness Program. He's not a stranger to the Bay Area. He went to Stanford University for undergrad, where he was the 2-time captain, academic All-American track athlete. You did the triple jump, high jump, sprint,
then long jump.
Not the hurdles, because that's not jumping. That's just running over the hurdles. He then went to University of Michigan for medical school. And as he mentioned in Journal Club, matched into orthopedic surgery at Yale University. At the beginning of his 3rd year, he experienced a spinal cord injury, paralyzing him from the chest down. After 2 surgeries and intense rehabilitation, he is blessed with some return of motor function and navigates the world as a proud wheelchair user, managing the long-term sequelae of an incomplete spinal cord injury. Also, excellent wheelchair basketball player, getting into wheelchair rugby as well, and sets picks and boxes out expertly on the team, which trying to convey that to my team as well. He went on to earn a master's in engineering, science, and technology entrepreneurship from the University of Notre Dame and completed his family medicine residency at Memorial Hospital in South Bend, Indiana. And as you can see, he has a catchphrase, disabusing disability, hoping to demonstrate that disability doesn't mean inability. We had an amazing dinner last night. I have to tell you, I was so energized after the dinner and just looking at the world in a whole new way and the opportunities in front of us. And I was excited to learn that President Biden appointed Dr. Okunlami to the President's Council on Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition. And I'm really excited to see what you do with accessibility for all of our students, so all of our students can participate in sport, which is so important. And thank you so much. I'm really excited to have you here for Grand Rounds. Welcome.
Thank you. So I will also apologize because somewhere between dinner last night and this morning, I now have like a viral infection that my eye is dripping. I'm like sneezing up here. So I apologize that like I seem like a total hot mess. I don't know where this came from. And she told me that she saw someone yesterday that had something. So I blame her. But so, I always do a very, very brief description. I'm Franmi Okunlami. Most people call me Dr. O. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a middle-aged Black man with brown skin, short black hair, I've got on glasses, a bow tie, and a jacket, and I'm sitting in a manual frame wheelchair. Now, I tell people that I give myself a visual description not so you get a sense of my fashion, but because we don't recognize that individuals that are blind or low vision, that don't have access to see who I am, see what I look like, and see my slides, don't get a chance to fully participate in presentations. And so what I do now every time I do a presentation is I do a very brief visual description and I describe my slides. Now, not a couple months ago anymore, last year, I gave the closing plenary at the AAPMNR, the PMNR National Conference. Afterwards, someone came up to me and he was in tears. And he was so much in tears that he couldn't get his words out, so waited a couple moments. And then afterwards he said, I came here from China because I want to be a physician. He said, in China, they didn't let me go to medical school because they don't believe that individuals that are blind can be doctors. He said, it wasn't until coming to this presentation, I've been to countless academic talks, and I've never felt seen until this presentation. He said, the way that you describe yourself and describe the slides, people don't understand how you cannot participate when people give presentations and you have no idea what it is that they are seeing. Now, I'll tell you another story. Past couple of years, there's a colleague at the University of Michigan. He's a lawyer and he's blind. And he and I have had lots of conversations about this practice of doing visual descriptions. So much so that he ended up writing an article called Putting a Closing to Disclosing the Clothing. Once again, he called it Putting a Closing to Disclosing the Clothing. Because he said, I don't know why you, a sighted individual, will think that me, a blind individual, cares anything about the type of bow tie you're wearing or the fabric of your blazer. He said, it's a damaging process that takes up too much time. During this Zoom era, everyone goes around the Hollywood squares and takes forever to do their description, describing what's in their background, describing their clothing. Now, why would I tell you these two seemingly conflicting stories? I tell you these two stories because I want you to then know that when you've met one person with a disability, you have met people nodding their heads. What's the end of it? One person with a disability. So what I do not expect or hope that you will do after today is furiously take notes and say that everything that Dr. O said is what I'm going to do when I then meet a wheelchair user, right? Because it is my N of one experience. But what I do hope that you will do is at least start to think of things in a different way and at least recognize that there are questions that exist that you may not have seen. There are things that are being discussed in spaces that you may not have been involved in, and at least recognize that those conversations need to continue. So hopefully there will be things that you hear today that you may not have heard before, but what I want you all to recognize is that each one of you has something to do with this space, whether you knew you did prior to coming here or not. So I start off my presentations and I talk about equity versus equality, and here's an image that many of you have probably seen countless times. So in this image, in keeping with what I always do, is an image that has two halves of it. On each half, there are three people. I call them tall, medium, and short. And tall, medium, and short are all trying to then look over or through a fence to see what appears to be a baseball game on the other side. On one side of it, tall, medium, and short each are standing on one box, such that tall and medium can see the game, but short cannot. On that side, it says the word equality. Now, just as I'm talking, show of hands, who has seen this used before somewhere? Probably in DEI presentations where they're trying to tell you that equality and equity are not the same thing, right? Because on the equity side, we now see that those boxes have been moved such that tall is no longer standing on a box, medium is still standing on their one box, but now short is standing on two boxes and can now see the game, right? So that side, it says equity. Trying to say that equity is giving people what they need to be able to have access, whereas equality is giving everyone the same thing. Now, as you can see, if I use those boxes and I say that those boxes are resources, how many resources did it take to achieve equity versus equality? The same. And so it does not always take more resources to then provide those who have the need with the access. It just takes a reallocation of the resources to put them in the place of greatest need. Now, when we have this conversation in medicine, I challenge people to say, is this what you feel like we do? Do we provide resources based on need, or do we have other criteria that we decide who then deserves to get certain resources? Now, it's very easy to have this conversation with this slide here when the reality of our world really looks more like this. So now this adds a third image to that same slide. that has reality underneath it. And in the reality slide, you've got the tall individual standing on 7 or 8 boxes well above the field, able to see the game. And now you have short individuals standing in a box-sized hole. Now, what happens when we talk about this in the real world is people will often say, well, why did the tall individual have to give their box up? Right? Why did that tall individual have to give their box to that short individual? That tall individual worked very hard for their box. So regardless of whether they need the box or not, is it their responsibility to then give their resources to other people? And this is where I challenge you to then think about that. Within our space, do we then allocate resources based on where people actually need them? Or are there other factors that then determine why someone wants to then hold on to their own box? Now, what I didn't tell you yet is that when I've used this slide, I've used it countless times. Goes back to what one of your chiefs said earlier about how she started to talk about a separate conversation. I said it's not a separate conversation at all. So I use these slides often. And people will then either comment in the chat during the presentation or afterwards. Sometimes my slides get posted online. And online afterwards, someone said, why don't those insert racial slur here buy tickets like everyone else and watch the game from the inside? Yep, why don't those insert racial slur here buy tickets like everyone else and watch the game from the inside? Now, I say this not to be controversial or jarring, but I say it because what we don't recognize is that when two people see the same image, they may see two very different problems. So while you have seen this slide in DEI presentations where people are trying to talk about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, they're trying to talk about how to give people access. Some people see this. And when I first started using these slides, this was prior to all the legislation that we see with people now saying that DE&I shouldn't be discussed or taught. So it has changed a lot in the last 3 years of me using this presentation. Because when I would say this, sometimes people are like, oh, I don't believe that. No one actually says that. But now I think that we have probably seen that there are movements to try to say that diversity, equity, and inclusion should not be discussed or taught. And so that's why when those of you that were here for Journal Club, I said, I want you to be honest about your thoughts. Because too often we have conversations and we don't realize that the people sitting in the room with us do not even think that the conversation should be had. As we are talking about trying to provide access, there are people saying, why are we trying to provide access for this population? Why are we trying to give someone something that they don't deserve? Why do I have to give up of my time, of my resources to support a community that just shouldn't be there in the first place? And so I use all sorts of examples. I try to prod people to then say it, but I will tell you countless times, I know, and this is not trying to be critical or negative, but I know that everywhere I go, there will be a population of people in this space that I'm in that do not think that I deserve to be there. That think that this is just some sort of pat on the back. Think that this is just some sort of DEI checkbox that says we are satisfying our quota for doing DEI grand rounds this year. And I'm not saying that's what's happening here, but I will tell you that I know that to be the case. And I say directly to people when they do that, I say, if you thought that at this esteemed institution, that this topic was important enough to invite someone to speak about it, then I look forward to then following up with you a year from now to see what is different at your institution. Because if the goal of these academic presentations is to actually learn something, to see how we can improve our clinical practice, then I hope that there is something that can be taken from Grand Rounds presentations. And I've refused invitations at times when people do not seem to actually care about the subject matter, and when they don't do anything, and I'll be very direct and honest with you, when they don't put any respect on my name, and they don't know who I am or what I've done before I've come in. And so I get there and they're falling over themselves, not having any knowledge of the work that I've done, but just knew that this was a disabled Black man that had some devastating injury who was going to come inspire us all with his story. That is not what I'm here to do today. While I do feel as though I have a story that you can learn from, I'm not here to be an inspiration to you because I have some devastating life of disability. What I'm here to do for you all today is something that already began, and that's why I gave you credit for having this done as a journal club as well. Because to be able to look and critically discuss some of the literature that exists in this space and to see how that may impact your lives is what this is supposed to be about. So if you did not understand why disability was relevant, my hope is that at the end of this time, you will see why disability is relevant, especially to every single one of you that's in a department of orthopedics as an academic institution. So I told you all about starting to live life on the other side of the stethoscope, and here's just a little collage about my life. I told you that I was born in Nigeria to 2 physician parents. So this image here has me, jumping through the air at Stanford University, as I mentioned, being an academic All-American triple jumper, captain of my team. I then went to the University of Michigan for medical school. So that next image is of me graduating from medical school, matched into orthopedic surgery residency at Yale. And my family there that you see, I got 2 physician parents. My grandparents both have doctorate degrees. My sister's a lawyer. I do this not to pat myself on the back, but because my family said that education was something that can never be taken from you. And so having an education was the thing that they said would then allow me to then get into rooms and be seated at tables that I deserved to be at. So I saw my parents using their mind and their hands to then affect change in people's lives as physicians. My mother being a pediatric intensivist and my father being a neonatal intensivist. But when they came to this country, the United States didn't recognize their training, and so they had to redo their residency training. So they both went to Howard University for their pediatrics residency. My mother then went to Johns Hopkins for her fellowship. My dad went to Georgetown before we then moved to Indiana, where my family has been ever since. And so that was something that I saw, the work that my parents did. I heard them talking about patient care every single day. I saw countless family members in the different professions that they were in and the different specialties in medicine. And I thought that I was well on my way to doing that until this happened. And so I think you already heard that in my 3rd year of orthopedics residency at Yale, I dove into a pool and I broke my neck. I had a C6 burst fracture, and now I'm a C6 incomplete quad. So I had 2 surgeries at the hands of my own colleagues at Yale before then going to Chicago to do my inpatient rehab. And as she said, I was blessed with some return of motor function, but that actually isn't really the story at this point. What the story is that at this point is when I saw how inaccessible our world is. Prior to this point, I was one of those individuals standing on multiple boxes. I tell people that if we go back to those slides, I do not identify with one of those people specifically, but each of us is one of them at some point in our lives in some way. Being born of able body was a box that I was given that I did nothing to deserve. Being born a man was a box that I was given that I did nothing to deserve. Being born to 2 physician parents was a box that I was given that I did nothing to deserve. But then having a disability became one of those holes that was dug like the short person. Being born a person of color then coming to this country was a hole that was dug. Because often what people will say in those images is some people may have worked hard for those boxes, but others will say, I don't know what that short individual did to dig themselves into that box-sized hole. So why is it my responsibility to then dig them out of the box that they put themselves in? Privilege and prejudice exist in this world, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. And so I know that I have multiple places of privilege that have allowed me to be where I am. I know that I would not have been invited to this grand rounds had it not been for multiple elements of privilege that I've been provided. I do not think that I am the first or the best or the only disabled person to have these conversations. I do not think that I'm more qualified than other individuals to be able to do this. And I do know that because of the DEI craze, I've been able to then be given opportunities to speak in countless spaces that have allowed other people to start to then hear my name and now invite me to speak as well. That is privilege. I recognize that. I also know that I've been subjected to prejudices that probably kept me out of spaces that I thought I deserved to be. And so this disability conversation I mentioned earlier is one that I think is ubiquitous. I use it as a framework to discuss any other marginalized or minoritized group. Because disability does not discriminate based on race, gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic status. And so therefore, if we then think about the disability community and how to provide access, it will allow you to start thinking about all other marginalized communities and where we are not providing sufficient access. And it will give you a framework upon which to think about why we are or are not doing so. And then if you want to think about it just from a clinical standpoint, taking it from today, seeing every single one of the patients that you are going to then be taking care of is going to be one of those individuals at some point in their lives. Prior to then coming to you, they may have seen themselves as that individual standing on multiple boxes well above the field. But then when they come to see you, based on what it is that you're either going to help them with or based on whatever intervention you are then going to do, they may find themselves as one of those individuals in a box-sized hole. And so then you'll say, well, how's any of this relevant to disability? And this is the slide that I bring it together. Because now on this image, I tell people, if you look at this slide is the same concept of people trying to watch the game on the other side of the field. But had we used those first images alone, every single person was the same race or ethnicity in those first images. Now you have people with different skin tones, different clothing styles, different hairstyles, different abilities. And then I noticed several months after using the slide, the rainbow, which I now say represents our LGBTQ plus population as well. So when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, who are we not talking about? Right? We talk often about race and gender a lot, but there are many, many elements of diversity that are included that we do not talk about. There are many people that are being excluded from conversations. There are many people that we are not allocating resources to, often because we don't think they deserve to be there, or just because we don't know how to include them. So that's where the hope will be, that after this conversation today, you will see in your own day-to-day life the places and the spaces where people are not there. And it's often not because they're not capable or competent or qualified to be there, but it might be because there was no ramp to get into the building. The door wasn't wide enough to fit their wheelchair, or there's no interpreter to then translate for them to be able to then access. And so these are the spaces and the places where we can then be more accessible in everything that we do. Now, I will take the moment now, because I don't do the best job of doing this in all my presentations myself, but not all disabilities are apparent or visible. So my lived experience is just my N of one of being a wheelchair user. And so most of the lens through which I look at this is as a wheelchair user. But we talked about the deaf and hard of hearing community already earlier. There are individuals that are blind or low vision. There are individuals that have mental health disabilities. And so all of these fit into this conversation about disability. And that's what I want us to then think about, right? And I'll tell you that honestly, most of the disabilities that you probably have encountered throughout your life are ones that you do not see. And so especially as it pertains to medical education and then clinical practice, I will guarantee that, not asking anyone to disclose, there are individuals in this room right now that have disabilities. So the work that I do at the University of Michigan now primarily is I run disability services for the entire university. And so my office is the office that provides the academic accommodations for any student that has a disability-related barrier. Now, physical disabilities are the minority in that group. So yes, there are things that we're doing where we're providing accessible dorms for students that need, physical access. We're building ramps to buildings. We're putting automatic door openers in places. And that's what people see. That's what people think of the most. But what they don't think about is the student with dyslexia that then needs specific technologies. They don't see the student that has ADHD or bipolar or schizophrenia and deserves access the same as any other student does, right? They don't see the student with cancer that then might have to then have their chemo, and we need to adjust their schedule to be able to then make sure that they can then get access to their education. Those students may have differences. They may have disabilities. They may have something that impacts their access, but they are no less qualified to be there. And that is the framework that people don't think of. They see disability as inability, and that we do not provide access to allow someone to demonstrate that they can still achieve success. Now, access and success are two different things, because I tell people all the time, our office is not here to guarantee student success, because disabled students will fail just like non-disabled students will fail. But you need to give them every opportunity to fail as the non-disabled students do. So now disabled students may be lazy. They may work hard. But once again, it is not a consequence of their disability. If that is the case, they are people like anyone else. So that's why I say people having access is step one. If they fail after that and we gave them access, it's now on them. But if people are failing because we're not giving them the access that they deserve, we are the ones that are failing them. And so that is something that I tell you, I did not see in the way that I see it now. I did not create this world of accommodations. It existed before I lived there. But our institutions have been trying. We talked about the Americans with Disabilities Act. legislation that then says that we are mandated by law to provide access for people that have disability-related barriers. But it's one of these things that you can have the greatest law or policy in the world, but if it is never implemented, if it is not enforced, then it doesn't actually even matter. So I told people earlier that I don't like giving talks, right? People chuckle, they're like, you've been talking all day long. I like starting conversations though. So what I hope is that at some point, some of the juices will be flowing, and I want any one of you throughout the presentation to interject, to disagree, raise your hand. I don't know if anyone's managing the chat online, but I would love for people that disagree with me, have their thoughts. I want you to chime in as well. So I told you that all this is about access. Oh, and I forgot I put this one in here. So I put this back in there for you all because I had to take it out of many presentations because most people like get all weird when they see this. But I don't know if it's actually going to play. Let me see it. Hold on. So this is me hosting. I made this video almost as sort of like a recruiting film because people did not believe that individuals with disabilities could then be surgeons still, could be doctors. So this was in a cadaver lab. After I had my injury, I got a master's degree in engineering, science, and technology entrepreneurship at Notre Dame. And this was actually throughout my master's degree program where those little things that you're looking at in the spine, I was working for a group called Custom Orthopaedic Solutions to try to make pedicle screw placement in spine surgery safer, more effective. This was like 8 years ago now. And so what we were doing is we were using a computer-aided design software. And I'm out of the space now, so this might even exist in a way that it didn't now. And you're all going to look at me like, dude, we did this just like yesterday. But what we were doing at that time was we were taking the patient images, right? And then on a computer-aided design software, I was then determining the trajectory of the pedicle screw. And then we 3D printed these guides that were then the templates that we used to then place our pedicle screws. So this was a video that I made, one, for the company that we will demonstrate, because those were actually really effective, guides that we were using in real life. But it was also something I showed as I was not sure if I was going to then go back into residency because people were questioning if I would still be able to operate. They were questioning how I was going to be able to then be at the OR. And so I said, this is just real life proof of how it can happen because people couldn't fathom understanding how that was going to be possible. What you can't see is that I'm in this like scooter type device there that I'm using at the table. You can't see it, but that's how I'm sitting at the table there today. So yes, I was seated, but I was seated in more of an upright position. It was not like I was sitting like a hand surgeon, as you mentioned. But these are some of the things that we can do to give people access. Now, this is the standing frame chair that truly opened up a bunch of doors for me. This is an image of has two sides to it. One of them, I'm looking through a microscope, diagnosing rupture of membranes, which most of you probably don't remember what that is either anymore. And I was surprised that I had to do it too, because I did a family medicine residency after this. And you had a former orthopedic surgeon, dude with a disability, now delivering babies. It was wild. And I'll tell you that chair was like a hydraulic functioning standing frame wheelchair. I don't use that much anymore, but so I would deliver babies and then be able to stand up and then put baby on mom's belly. And always they'd be like big brother or sister in the corner. They'd be like, she's a transformer. And like the mom would be like, you can stand. It was amazing. So that chair gave me access, right? The other side, I'm about to access someone's radial artery to do a cardiac cath. But this chair was one of the things that I thought was a box that I'd been given that allowed me to then re-enter this space of medicine, right? It allowed me to be able to be upright at the operating room table to deliver babies. But here's the thing that happened. I mentioned at dinner last night, Judy Heumann. Judy Heumann is an individual who this world lost a couple months ago. But Judy Heumann is to the disability civil rights movement what Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks combined were for Black civil rights. And so Judy and I got a chance to know each other over this past couple of years. And Judy got to watch this film, like a trailer to a film that was being made about my life. And after she watched it, she said, you know what, Dr. O, if I didn't know you before having seen this, I don't think I would have wanted to. And I was like, whoa, Judy, I thought we were friends. Like, why would you say that? She said, well, look at it. It's all about huffing and puffing and standing and walking. I was like, I know, it's pretty dope, right? She said, Dr. O, you have a platform now. You have an opportunity. What message are you giving to people that lose the ability to walk and never regain it? What message are you then giving to people that never had the ability to walk? What you are doing by like promoting these standing frame wheelchairs and all of these things is that you now have access again because you are closer to your able-bodied standard. The medical model of disability is what we are all taught. This medical model views disability as the inability. Oh, thank you. I never restart this. It's always 4 hours later and then 4 hours later. So I'm sure that's why none of my things didn't work, because I never restart my computer. I probably got like 12 real viruses and this virus I have in my eye right now. So the medical model of disability is what we are taught, and it is the thing that we see disability as pathology. We see disability as something that needs to be fixed or rectified or eliminated, and that is not your fault. That is what medicine teaches us. And so people then say to me, like, how do you balance this conversation then? Are you saying that as physicians, we are wrong because we want to then rid the world of disability? Are we wrong because we want to optimize people's function? We were having conversations last night about the things that we do for our patients, and we're talking about the onc world and how they're super excited when their patients walk again. You have a big whack for this osteosarc. You either get a megaprosthesis or an endoprosthesis, and if you just stand and walk, that is amazing progress. I agree with that. I do not want to take that away. But what we have to also recognize is that there may be someone who doesn't walk. We do everything that we can for them, and they do not stand. That person needs to see a world where they still have access as well. That person needs to come into a world where they can see that people that are like them are still given the opportunity, the access to be successful. And if we continue to perpetuate this norm that you have to have this able-bodied standard to be able to achieve success, we're going to perpetuate this belief that disability is inability. Now, I will tell you, this is a mindset shift, because it is hard for me every single day to still like try to then push this forward. But if we think about it in this way, and we think about how easy is it to be able to give access. I tell people, so I'm building a house right now, and this is another, first world problem, privilege type of situation. But I'm building a house right now, and everything that I want to change in that house is considered a custom upgrade, right? So I want to be able to roll underneath my sink, because I don't want to have to like wash dishes like this because there's a cabinet under my sink. So I just don't want, there's no big deal. You've been to plenty of hotel rooms where you can roll underneath the sink, right? But for whatever reason, when you buy cabinets, the sink cabinet thing, there is always a cabinet under the sink, like as the standard. So it's a custom upgrade to not have a cabinet under my sink, especially in the kitchen, right? I don't know how many of you have kitchen sinks with no cabinet under. Anybody have no cabinet under their kitchen sink? You probably all have a cabinet under your kitchen sink, right? Yeah, so I have to pay to have fewer cabinets. It makes no sense to me, right? Then tall ceilings. Tall ceilings are nice, and everyone has to pay for tall ceilings. It's like another custom upgrade. So this is something that I said to them the other day, and I was serious, but I was kind of jokey. I was like, you know what? I only want 5-foot ceilings. And they looked at me, they're like, Doctor, that doesn't make any sense, doctor. Nobody wants 5-foot ceilings. Nobody can enter your house if they have. Oh. And I was like, exactly. I'll be just fine with 5-foot ceilings myself. I don't need cabinets up at 8 feet tall. I can't get there anywhere. So just make everything, 5-foot ceilings. I can have 4 stories to my house now. Should be the same price, right? Because it's all fine. And they said, well, but nobody can come visit you if you have 5-foot ceilings. I said, that is how the disability community feels every single day. If I'm not even allowed to build my house, my personal home that I'm going to live in for the people that come to see me, if I build my house with only that in mind, and I don't think about the other people that may enter my house, that is the world right now. We have made the world based on an able-bodied standard, and those with disabilities have to come in and custom upgrade everything to be able to have access. And if you think about it in that way, it changes the way you go about your day-to-day life. Because the fact that the world was not built with disability in mind is not your fault. But the fact that we continue to build things without disability in mind is. I tell people that everyone can use the ramp, while not everyone can use the stairs. So why is it that we continue building literal and figurative stairs to things that are barriers to people's access when we can then build things that give more people access? The ramp is something that the wheelchair user can use, the parent pushing the stroller can use, the person delivering the FedEx package can use. And so that is something that should not be that difficult to then provide access via a ramp. So think about what other spaces and places in our lives we can build more literal and figurative ramps to give people access. But go back to the beginning of this conversation and see what is the barrier that makes it such that people think that those people don't deserve access in the first place. Because that is usually the crux of the problem. And it is not that we don't have sufficient resources to do it, because we see the multi-million-dollar buildings that we build and all of these things that are like nice to haves that we put in them. And we boast about some newfangled thing that we put in there, but then we don't give access to people that then cannot enter. We don't think about ways to then equip buildings with the things that we need to make sure more people will be able to access them. I'll encourage you afterwards to look up the United States Olympic and Paralympic Museum. This museum is amazing in terms of all of the different things that they have done to be able to give people access. Curb cuts are something that you probably all know about, but you probably don't think about every day. A curb cut allows someone that is on the road to get onto the sidewalk without having to, I wouldn't be able to get on the sidewalk without a curb cut. This is like an amazing thought now, because I've only lived my world in this disability for 10 years now. But I think about when we didn't have curb cuts, an individual that was a wheelchair user would not be able to get up onto the sidewalk without there being a ramp there or someone there to help them. That is mind-blowing to me. I see myself as a very independent individual. I travel all the time. I play a bunch of sports. I have a 12-year-old son. I take care of him. I do all these things because there's access in this world now. But I think about how many people for years were not able to demonstrate that they could still be contributing members of society because you literally cannot get to places because of something as simple as not having a curb cut. The number of times I was late to a presentation one day because there was someone blocking. So I'm always late for things anyway, but I was making my way to the presentation and someone had parked in front of the ramp that went down from this curb, right? And it was like what's that movie called? Office Space, where like you switch lanes and you're not sure, you switch lanes over to this side. I totally dated myself. And I remember Office Space when you switch lanes and then like the other lane starts moving fast and I'm like, oh shoot. So I stopped because it was a long city block that I was like, I could go backwards all the way to the curb cut there, push down the street to then come this way, or hope that this person's car that's blocking the path will come and like move their car. So I'm literally like deciding, waiting. And of course I decided to turn around and then the person moved. I turned back around and I came back. But that was a stupid little thing and this was the American College of Surgeons. I was giving a talk on disability at the American College of Surgeons, and I was about to be late simply because somebody was blocking the curb cut. And I said, that type of thing it's just frustrating that I still have to deal with that. That then people are going to then say, I'm showing up on, pardon my language, colored people time, and I'm late for all these reasons. And I don't want to then tell them that the reason I'm late is because of some inaccessible thing that exists in my day. But I did tell them because I said, this is what we encounter. This is a seemingly meaningless small thing, but other elements of my life are inaccessible to me in ways that then jeopardize my ability to be able to demonstrate that I can be successful. And this is what all of our students, our trainees are experiencing. I told you I've got multiple boxes, lots of privilege, lots of degrees, lots of appointments. And I still have to then go through that. But then I'm the person that's the keynote, so your presentation's not going to go without me anyway. But for the person that's going to get left behind, because whatever it was that then limited their access made someone think that they didn't take this seriously, or they don't want to be here, or they're not trying hard enough. And you don't realize how many literal and figurative hurdles are in the way in order for them to get there. You all weren't at the conversation last night, but that's why she's talking all about hurdles. Those are the things that we are actively perpetuating that we could then start to change. Now, I have this here to continue with the story about sort of the real life. So there's an image of a building with some stairs to get up to it and a sign that says, stop, pass holders and appointments only. So I was invited to my friend's house a couple months ago to then talk about policy, to talk about how policies had impacted our community. But the policy, one of the policies that they had was that I had to get a COVID test before I entered their house. And this was where they sent me to get my COVID test. So as I was leaving the hotel that morning to then go to this COVID test site, luckily somebody else was walking across the street and we kind of like locked eyes and realized we're going to the same place. And so when I got there, she went inside, said that there's a gentleman outside that needs his COVID test. So they came out, did the self-swab, and I was on my way. And so then we got into our friend's house, and here we are sitting at a long table. I'm there at the very end of that long table in my white coat, and this is where we're having conversations about these policies. And instead of talking about the policy specifically, I then talked about that experience I had that morning. And I said, well, you all have a policy that says that I have to then get a COVID test before I come, but you sent me to an inaccessible COVID testing location. I said, had this been something more important than a COVID test just to enter your house, had this been some necessary procedure, had this been sort of a dark and stormy night and I hadn't been able to stay waiting outside by myself, I would not have been able to then do this and I would not have been able to come into your house. I said, and so this is how, if we do not have accessible policy, then the people that we hope to benefit from them will not get those things. Now I see people sort of whispering to each other already, do you know which of my friends' houses I was visiting? Is that a chuckle that people know? Ooh, no one knows? You don't know my friends yet? Really? I think some of you might. Speak up if you do it. I saw you chuckling about it. So yes, that was the White House. Now I say this once again, not to like pat myself on the back, but because I was invited by the White House to something that was called Communities in Action, Building a Better Michigan. I was specifically invited to talk about how Biden and Harris administrative policies impacted the disability community and impacted the state of Michigan. Yet they did not even recognize that the policy that they had said to go get a COVID test was inaccessible. I do this not to say that if even the White House is doing this, then we're all doomed. No, I'm saying that every one of us has an opportunity every day to think about access. And it's things as simple as this that are still happening. So that's why I give everybody grace, right? And so I had that conversation with them, not to bite the hand that fed me, but to say that this is an example of the reason why I am here today. That even the White House, when you're putting together things like this, you have to be intentional about everything you're doing because the standard, the norm that we live in right now is not built with disability access in mind. And that's how hard it is to then implement things that are actually going to be accessible to our communities. And so once again, if you do not have people that you see in your community that need that access, it doesn't mean that they are not there. If this is the first time that this department has had this conversation, it is not your fault, but it doesn't mean that disabled individuals have not come through this program. It doesn't mean that disabled individuals have not needed access. It doesn't mean that you don't have nurses and techs and attendings and colleagues that have some disability that could benefit from better access. And once again, if you take away the word disability and you just think about who needs access and how are we providing that? Now, I challenged some of the residents earlier because I said, you know what, I'm sure that many people think that you just cannot be a disabled orthopedic surgeon. And so one of my first talks post-injury was I was invited to go back to Yale to give grand rounds at Yale. And, they got up here and did it beautiful. They had like my picture and they told like my whole background and talked about all the things I did while I was at Yale. So proud of themselves for them having me there. And then they gave me a huge round of applause before I even said anything. And then I got up there in my presentation. I said, thank you so very much, for all of this. I said, if I had applied to residency today, do you think that I would match? And they said, well, therapy, orthopedics is a very physically demanding specialty. And we would need to make sure that you're able to accomplish the physical tasks that are then part of this profession. And I said, do you say that to the, 85-pound, Asian woman that applies, or do you just not rank her? I said, I'm going to be honest with you all because you just waxed eloquent about all the accolades that I had. And that was 10 years ago. And so if all of those things were true 10 years ago, and now I have 3, shouldn't I be more qualified to then be a resident here? I matched here once already, so why would you then question if I could do it again? You didn't know what my physical abilities were at the time. There's no sort of American Ninja Warrior for orthopedic surgery residency training skills. You just show up, you match, you see what they had done. Most people don't make highlight videos when they come. You don't have recruiting film to then match into orthopedics. So you don't actually know, other than the sub-buys that someone does, what type of physical skills they have. And I will tell you, I don't know you all, but I guarantee that there's some resident in this audience, I don't know which one of you it is, that has 2 left feet for hands, but they still let you operate. Maybe we shouldn't, but that's why you're here to be trained to do so. I'm just saying, we all know who they are. I'm not trying to be critical of them, but that's why we train them. Seriously. You don't get to residency being a surgeon already. You get to residency as a medical student that then we're going to then train to be able to then do what this is. Some of you have certain skills that are better than others, but we are then going to then give you what is necessary to become a capable, competent, and qualified surgeon. But we are choosing who we give those opportunities to based on biases that then we hold. We're deciding who we think has the appropriate skills to do so. And this is all through this lens of ableism. That believes that there are certain standards that everyone should have. And that if you don't have that, you can't do it. Now that, as I said, medicine is a very challenging topic. And it is something that's not just with sort of the stroke of some wand that we're going to change. Because I told you all earlier, I do not believe that every single person can do every single thing. But I say that when we graduate medical students, we are not graduating pluripotent stem cells. They're going to differentiate into very specific specialties. So why is it that we put a barrier up at entrance to medical school? There are plenty of individuals that may have very, very significant disability, but that can then impact change in the world of medicine by going through and getting a medical education and then choosing a specialty that they're able to do. It doesn't mean that every single person is going to then be a neurosurgeon or an orthopedic surgeon or a spine surgeon. But that person can change the landscape of healthcare. That person can get a medical education and then maybe be one of these individuals that looks at how we can improve our medical spaces so that our patient population that enters has more access. Because when we don't have individuals that have different needs in that space, we are not intentionally creating access for different populations. So for me, this is the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is not just a checkbox. It is not just to say that we are woke and that we care. It is because people's lives are literally at stake when we do not know the different needs that people have. I make jokes about being late to presentations or building 5-foot ceilings in my home, but there are people who are not getting the necessary medical care that they need because we don't understand the needs of different communities, because we don't value the lived experiences of different people, because we don't recognize that there are different ways that we can create access than what we have done before. We rely on the status quo of the norm of what we've done all these times before, but we are not modifying and changing things to then meet the demands of the increasingly diverse world in which we are in. The interventions that we now have make it such that people can live with disability much longer. The treatments that we have are now creating disability in a way by then rectifying something else that may have been going wrong. Yet we are not keeping up with how to then make sure that that access follows. Now, I've taken way too long. I've got a bunch of videos that I really want to do all. I'm not going to get to them. I think I'm going to end with one of the videos that I was going to show you, and then I know that we got to go. So I will share this video, and then I might eke out 3 extra minutes for the second one. So real quick, here's this one. Oh, I don't think the captions are going to show, which might be hard for you to understand, but bear with me.
I'm lucky that I have my parents. Every successful deaf person I know, their parents were advocated for them when they were young and made sure that their kids got a chance. That's really all we need, is a chance to do what we want to do. I never really thought of myself as a trailblazer. I decided myself, by the way, this is what I want to do and what do I need to do, and you have to go through all these steps to get to the point where you want to be. In my case, a practicing family doc. I've heard from my graduating probably several hundred people who have told me that it was because of me that they were able to go into medicine. These are people hearing loss. Michigan has been very good to me in the sense that they've always supported me. They are very accepting of my hearing loss. When I became chair, I was able to recruit several very highly successful young faculty, and they actually proposed focus on providing healthcare clinically, providing healthcare education for students and residents and fellows, and providing healthcare research to improve the healthcare for people with disabilities of our type, not just people with hearing loss. It's been very, very successful. We're talking about people applying to medical school with disabilities. You have to realize these are the cream of the crop. They have gone through a lot more hoops and figured out how to get to where they are that most people haven't had to deal with. That we're not actually lowering standards when we admit them. We probably are raising standards because these are people who are really top notch. I think Michigan has always been a leader in equal opportunities for everybody. The two previous chairs have created a culture here in family medicine. Like a way we're kind of counter culture being here in Michigan, but we also have a very supportive culture where we tolerate people doing different things. We realize people are here not just to only take care of patients and that are part of it, but they're also here to do research, they're here to teach. One of the things I would love the next chair to do, and I really hope they do, is to continue to support that kind of culture, because I really think more than anything, not me, it's not the previous chair, it's the culture that lets the faculty be so successful. It's not one individual, it's the whole group. Am I impressed with myself? I am satisfied. Look, I feel good. I did what I wanted to do. And in retrospect, I impacted a lot of people positively, not only patients, but also other people with disabilities, and we've opened up a whole new area for American and non-American who have disabilities having equal chance in life and opportunity to bring more diversity or new ideas and new perspectives that would not have happened. I think we have just begun to scratch the surface of people with disabilities and what we can do for them.
So very quickly, so that was my chair, my department. That was one of the individuals that recruited me back to Michigan, gave me a chance. I wouldn't be here if he had to give me a chance. So my hope is that each of you may be that person that gives someone else a chance, one of your patients, to be able to let them know what it is that they can still do. I don't like going and giving presentations and not leaving someone with like tangible things, right? I don't want to just like come blow up the space and say you're all terrible. But like, I'm going to tell you, so the tangible thing, there's a QR code at the very end, but I wanted to show you the last video about the most tangible thing that like I am excited about that I think could be relevant to all of you all. And that is the adaptive sports and fitness program that we started. So that's going to be the very last video I'll show. It's shorter than the one I just showed you, but that one hopefully will also leave on like a more exciting note. And then we can have more conversations later on. You can keep in touch about what it is. So as orthopedic surgeons, every single one of you needs to know about adaptive sports. And so I'm going to show you one of the programs that we put together really quickly. Don't do it to me. Oh. Let me see if I can click on it. If it doesn't play, then it doesn't play. I might be out of luck for some reason. That's too bad. So that video, what we've done, adaptive sports are seen by many as sports for people with disabilities. But adaptive sports, the way that we see them, are not sports for people with disabilities, that are sports that are more accessible to and inclusive of more people. So the video that I was going to show was going to be a very brief video that talks about our program. We've got wheelchair basketball. I'll actually go back to this slide and then talk to you about what it is that we've got. So this is a program that I founded at the University of Michigan because I did not know about adaptive sports until after I then had my injury. Told you that I was an All-American athlete before. Sport was something that had given me a lot of access and opportunity in my life. And it's more than just about playing sports, right? But we are not giving that same opportunity to individuals with disabilities in the same equitable way. And so I then founded this program at Michigan that's got clinical components, it's got academic components, it's got just pure sports components, because everyone needs access to physical activity, right? Whether you love sports or not, everyone needs access to physical activity. And so what we've done is we've got our competitive sports at the bottom there that we offer, and then we've got adaptive sports because there's certain sports that we don't have competitive teams for, but we still support any student community member that wants to then be active in something. But then we've got a student group, we've got a research consortium where we do research on adaptive sports. The Adaptive Sport and Inclusive Recreation Initiative was the video I would have shown you, and that's what I want you all to know about. We've embedded adaptive sports curriculum into the PE programs of the public schools of our community. So every single child in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in our community plays adaptive sports. Now, why are we doing that? Because if you're the only wheelchair user in your community, you cannot play team sports if you need to play a wheelchair sport. But if you can then have 9 non-disabled individuals, and this is what was going to go to the conversation about sort of that disability simulation, it is not a disability simulation to play a wheelchair sport. Because I tell people, if you play hockey, you put what on your feet? Skates. Do you ever see anybody walking down the street on ice skates? No, they don't use those to get around on their day-to-day. They just use those to play the sport, right? A sport chair is different than the chair that you see me in right now. It is a piece of sporting equipment. And so anyone can use that piece of sporting equipment. So being in a sport chair is not simulating disability. It's not seeing what it feels like to be disabled that day. It is learning to maneuver a piece of sporting equipment. But what that sport does is it gives access to community that would not have been able to play that sport otherwise. And so I want every single one of you to be more familiar with adaptive sport, because every single one of your patients, if you are able to tell them about this world of adaptive sport that I was an athlete my entire life. My parents were physicians. I didn't even know adaptive sports existed, right? By a show of hands, how many of you knew about all the sports I just mentioned? Wheelchair basketball, wheelchair tennis, wheelchair volleyball. Did people know about them? Maybe a handful, but not everyone, right? That's not your fault, but that to me is ridiculous, because that means how many of your patients could you have told about these sports? I didn't tell other people. I don't know who does joints. You said you're on your joints rotation. A lot of my attendees when we had joints had a BMI cutoff to say they weren't going to operate on someone with a BMI over X, right? And then we would tell them to go lose weight. And then the person would say, well, doc, in my hip, I can't do anything. I can't walk. They're like, oh, well, do water aerobics. Like we tell them to do, go get into this, do that, do yoga. There are sports that you can play that are not going to put any impact on your joints. And so that's a whole nother space that we can be saying, all right, if you want to play wheelchair basketball, wheelchair tennis, this is a way to stay active. So adaptive sport, just like the curb cut, can provide access to so many people for so many different reasons. But it's this thing that we are not sharing. So let that be my last overtime thing to say, is that if you see adaptive sports, not as sports just for people with disabilities, but sports that give access to more people, what you will be doing, either intentionally or unintentionally, is elevating the visibility of a sport that does give the disability community something that they should have, that they deserve to have, but that they cannot do alone. Because without enough people participating in these sports, we're not going to be able to give equitable opportunity. And it is not disability simulation. And so I still have to then tell people that you are not being offensive by playing wheelchair sports. And I will tell you that when I said that this is just my N of one opinion, there are lots of people in the adaptive sports space that don't agree with this because they think that we're taking opportunities away from disabled people by having non-disabled people participate. I disagree. I would love for there to be, I don't think that we're going to see tomorrow, wheelchair basketball rivaling, Steph Curry on TNT, right? But if it does, perfect. If we have so many people that choose, do I want to go play for the Warriors or do I want to play for this wheelchair basketball team? That would be awesome. I think that would be a great place to be where we see adaptive sport on that same level. We're not going to anytime soon. So I think that this is just a good thing to be able to elevate adaptive sport, to create more access, more opportunity, more awareness, so that people can then see that our little catchphrase that if you can sit, you can play. And so everyone should be able to see that if we destigmatize disability at the children level, where kids do not see disability in the way that we see it as adults. My 12-year-old son has grown up his entire life with me, right? And now when he sees a wheelchair user, the question he asks is, what sport do you play? Because he knows so many Paralympians through our world that the lens that he sees a wheelchair user is that you must be an athlete. So it is a stereotype that he has, which, stereotypes aren't good, right? But this stereotype that my son has is that wheelchair users all play sports. He doesn't see wheelchair users as people that are broken, people that need to be fixed, people that have something wrong with them. He just sees them as his dad. And he knows that his dad is not broken, even though my neck is. It's fused now, so it's okay, don't worry. But he sees this as just a population of people that then has certain abilities. And that's the way that every single one of your patients should feel, regardless of whether it's a total knee or a mega prosthesis or whatever it is you're going to do. So I'm well over my time. Thank you for those of you online. I told you that I could talk the whole time, so I apologize. I didn't leave much room for conversation, but I appreciate this opportunity.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Rowe. That was great, and really appreciate you making the trip. And to commemorate your visit, we have this plaque for you. And thank you again for a wonderful talk.
Thank you so much.